let's get to it. I'm your host, Ryan Matthews, and this is the Rally Reading Series. We're an overtly political reading series. There is so much great political work and essays in print and online right now. And, the whole goal of this series is basically to just take these pieces into the streets, or in this case, into our homes via Zoom. So I hope you folks aren't succumbing to the Zoom fatigue. It is real, but this is our first time doing this, and it's very exciting. So, like a lot of firsts, it might not be exactly what you imagined, but we hope that it's great. So we're a little bit different at the Rally Reading Series. We're going to give you folks a chance to engage and ask some questions and provide feedback. You'll do that via the chat feature. So just feel free to drop in questions, and after we've heard from everyone, we'll sort of we'll ask the readers those questions and can kind of let them discuss amongst themselves. And then, we also at the Rally, we want to give our readers a chance to suggest either an organization for you folks to donate to, or a call to service, a recommendation for sparking debate within your community, or suggestions for how to confront prejudice or injustice. So that's another component. Tonight we're raising money for a really good cause. And I usually speak about this cause during the intermission, but unfortunately, we're not at the bar, we're not at Pete's candy store, so you can't refresh your drinks during the intermission. But nevertheless, tonight we'll be raising money for Food Bank NYC, which needs a lot of help right now. Their mission is to end hunger by organizing food, information, and support for community survival, empowerment, and dignity. Food Bank for New York City has been working to end food poverty in the 5 boroughs for over 35 years. As the city's largest hunger relief organization, they employ a multifaceted approach centered on helping low-income New Yorkers overcome their circumstances and achieve greater independence. Really, really important right now. So I'm gonna drop the link in the chat, and feel free to donate now or after the show. I'm gonna do that right now. Great, just admitting some more folks who are joining. Great. Let me just see if I can mute all again. Wonderful. So welcome newcomers. I just sort of did my spiel. This is the Rally Reading Series, if you're hopefully in the right place. And let me see. I think we'll sort of dive into it. I will introduce our first reader, who is, drumroll, Laura Reed, who is the author of Dresses from the Old Country and Instructions for My Mother's Funeral, as well as Chewbacca on Hollywood Boulevard, Reminds Me of You, which is one of the best titles I think I've ever heard. She served as Poet Laureate for Spokane, Washington from 2015 to 17, and teaches at Spokane Falls Community College. I am also a Washingtonian, so it's a special treat to introduce Laura Reed all the way from Washington State, which is, a first for the Rally Reading Series. So I'm going to turn it over to her. Let me just find her. Where did she go? There she is. And I'm going to pin her video for you, wonderful folks. There we go. Okay. Laura, welcome. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm drinking tea. I have a little bit of a rasp in my throat, I think just from all of the Zoom meetings, especially today, but I'm also drinking White Claw. So that really, I feel like that is the zeitgeist right now, tea and White Claw. So yeah, wonderful. So welcome.
Thank you. I really want to thank you for having me. I was actually born in New York, and my son and I were planning a trip to come for this reading. and then obviously couldn't, but here I am still connected to New York today. So that's really wonderful. And I appreciate our Washington connection as well, Ryan.
Excellent.
So I'm going to read 3 poems, and 2 of them are political in that they're about feminism, and one is about the time that we're living in right now. The first one is called phalangocentric, which is a word I didn't know until this experience, and the poem's kind of narrative, so it will explain it. Phalangocentric. At the spring quarter composition meeting, my male colleague runs up to the board and writes the word phalangocentric, and then explains that the essay in the Western tradition is phallic. He says we should tell our students this so they know the tradition they're writing in. I raise my hand and wait for a long time to be called on, and when I am, the director of composition apologizes. And I say, it's no problem, I've just been waiting patiently like a woman, which I thought would draw a laugh, but apparently there are some things about which we should be honest, and others we shouldn't. I say, I am not going to tell my students that, and then ask them to follow the rules we just questioned. Why not say the main idea can be arrived at? Or maybe there is no main idea. Maybe there are so many little ideas sticking out like curls that won't be brushed down. I know you can't brush curls. Doesn't anyone who has them? You have to use leave-in conditioner and product and scrunch them and then try not to touch them, or they will break and turn to frizz, and then where will you be? All week now, I've been thinking of this word, phalangocentric, which my friend said Derrida invented, and Wikipedia says is a portmanteau, which I guess is a blending of 2 words, which I thought was a suitcase. I love suitcases. I love the satiny lining and the clasps, and how they make me think of trains and steam and hoop skirts and top hats. How did I get here? Does it matter? Will I arrive? I don't know, but out the window, voila, the whole French countryside that Derrida once flew past while he thought about masculinity and language. Sometimes I think about dying, and what I see is the white sheet my boyfriend and I washed and draped over our balcony in Nice. We left it there to dry and walked through the city and ate chocolate and climbed up the hill and looked out over the Mediterranean, which is so many shades of blue and green you can't imagine. And he smoked a pipe, which I think made him feel more like a man. Something I couldn't say then, but I could now if I could find him. Would he laugh? Would he remember how when we got back, the sheet was dry and perfectly white and looked like nothing had happened? Okay, I'm just gonna keep going. I don't really know how the rally series works, but that's fine. Okay, all right. Okay. So this next one's kind of in the same vein. Oh, sorry.
I can unmute everyone to clap briefly. All right.
Okay.
Is everyone ready to clap? This is going to be great. Clap, my friends.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Back to me.
Okay, so this. For dinner, which is never good for me because I don't like eggs. And this seems to offend some people, but is not something I can fix. Someone brought up Monica Lewinsky, how she has a TED Talk now, and then someone else asked if it was about giving good blowjobs. I said, no, it's about shame. This was stronger than what I usually do, but not strong enough. So here I am, mechanical pencil scraping away on the receipt from the vet as I wait for the car wash, trying to make amends. When I was a child, I had a friend named Monica who painted my fingernails red. When her mom saw, she removed the polish right away because red was for hussies. Monica asked the audience to raise their hands if they had not done something when they were 22 that they regretted. When I was 22, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I will never forgive myself, though I couldn't help it. And the thing is, I don't have to tell you. I should have said more on Monica's behalf. I sat at that table while people said she should have changed her name, and my husband was the one who said that Monica pointed out that Bill Clinton didn't have to. I was mostly silent, staring at my nails, which I had just gotten done that afternoon, to see if I could stop biting them. When I was 22, I had a rule that I could only bite 3 a night because more than 3 Band-Aids looked like a problem. but now my nails looked good. The polish was clear, but had little flecks of glitter that flashed like intelligence when they caught the light. Okay, thank you. The last poem, you don't have to clap. Wait, okay. The last poem I'm going to read is about, okay, thank you. Okay. This one is about living right now, and it's called It's a Wonderful Life. Hold on. Oh, okay. It's a wonderful life. I tell my husband that I want to reach in my pocket and find Zuzu's petals, and he said that is a bad analogy for living in the world of coronavirus and wishing for the world before. His argument is that George Bailey left his wonderful life because Clarence thought he needed to see what the world would have been like if he hadn't been born. We are never pleased with each other's analogies, but his are almost universally flawed. And George Bailey works. Isn't part of our longing for the world we used to have about what the world would be like without us? I miss my students, I say, but what I really miss is the self I am as soon as I enter room 304, a person I put on and whom I like and find comforting and sometimes even surprising. But mostly I'm not looking for surprise. This morning I read an article about a woman who was on a ventilator for 6 days. She's lucky because she lived. And once you're on a ventilator, you have a 40 to 50% chance of dying. She may never be the same. It's hard for her to walk upstairs and she has to sit down in the shower and they're not sure if her voice will ever sound the way it used to. Help me, Clarence, get me back. My husband's mom did not like George Bailey. She said he was always yelling at the building and loan, at Mary, at Clarence, running down the snowy street with his lip bleeding. Every year on Christmas Eve, my friend calls to yell, "Merry Christmas, Mr. Potter," in my ear. She can do a perfect Jimmy Stewart, which makes me miss my mother-in-law and all the Christmas Eves of the past when we watched that movie and felt the tears rising unbelievably again as everyone gathered at the Baileys to pay him homage for believing in them. There's a woman who looks just like my nanny, and every year I say, "There's my nanny," as if I'm surprised to see her, which I always am. Right before the sorry, my computer froze. For not understanding the allusion to It's a Wonderful Life in Alison Bechdel's memoir. Summer and I could feel each other's warm living rooms and the snow falling outside. When my friend does her Merry Christmas, Mr. Potter, I laugh, but also wonder which one of us will die first, whether it will be her not able to make the call or me not there to answer. Thank you.
Wow, that was so lovely. Thank you so much, Laura. I'm going to unmute everyone. Go crazy. Here it is.
Okay. Thank you.
That's great.
Thanks, everyone.
Yay. That was wonderful.
All right, you're all back on mute.
Thanks.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much, Laura. That was really, really lovely. So much good imagery there. I want to talk more about it. If anyone has any questions or just, images that they loved or lines that specifically stuck out, feel free to drop it in the chat again. And we'll just keep right on moving. Let's see. Let me make sure that, yes, no one waiting. Great. Excellent. So I will keep us going here. Our next reader is someone who's very special to me. This is James Arthur. And James was my poetry professor back when I was an undergraduate at the University of Washington. And he was one of the best teachers that I've ever had in my entire life. I think I learned more about music and just about the music on the page and in the line from James more than from anyone else, I think. And so it's very meaningful for me to be able to introduce James, who is just a great soul. He was born, believe it or not, in Connecticut and grew up in Canada, as you may notice. I would love to have captions. It's difficult to understand him often, but I'm just kidding, James. He's the author of the poetry collection, The Suicide Sun, which just came out and is fabulous, as well as a book from Copper Canyon called Charms Against Lightning. James's poems have appeared in a small literary journal called The New Yorker. You probably haven't heard of it, as well as poetry, the New York Review of Books, and the London Review of Books. He received the Amy Lowell Traveling Poetry Scholarship, a Hodder Fellowship, a Stegner Fellowship, Discovery the Nation Prize, a Fulbright Scholarship to Northern Ireland, and a visiting fellowship at Exeter College, Oxford. And he teaches at Johns Hopkins University. And now I will turn it over to James. It's such a pleasure to have you here, James.
Thank you for that.
Are you unmuted, James?
Introduction, Ryan. That was really, that was really touching. And it was. I really appreciate it because, as I was saying before, I'm quite nervous. I don't normally get nervous before readings. I'm kind of a ham, but somehow the Zoom reading's a whole different. Feels like a whole different animal. So I feel out of my element, but excited too. And I'm going to read 3 poems from The Suicide Sun. And the first of them is called Drone. I am the drone of a banjo's 5th string. I am the drone that gives bottom to the chanter in a highland fling. Haw, hum. I am the drone of drone itself, planted so pleasurably in the mouth. A monotone, a lodestone. I'm an MQ-9, a reaper drone, ranging wide, circling in the sky. No windows, no cockpit, no one on board. See how my hellfires fly faster than sound. I am drone, from the timble under the cicada's wing. I gather no pollen and have no sting. Arriving unheard, I haunt the sky and inseminate the queen before I die. I am a poetry that celebrates power. I bring. The White House is empty. I bomb air, I bomb breath. My country, 'tis of thee I sing. And the second poem is called Troy. The war is wrapping up, and there's nothing left of Troy. Broken stone, broken clay, a smoke stain on the sky. The Greeks even broke the skull and back of Hector's little boy. Odysseus, packing up his bags, thinks, soon I'll be home. But this afternoon belongs to Ajax, son of Telamon, standing by a flock of sheep that he's butchered in a rage. And like a man who's just shot up a shopping mall or a school bus or a bank, Ajax can answer all this killing only with the killing of himself. Soon he'll sit down and start to weep like a naughty child full of shame, because he is a man killer, and a man killer does not kill sheep. The Greeks didn't come to halt a genocide or to spread democracy. Behind their great encampment are their island kingdoms, speckled against the sea. Beyond, scavenged by turning seabirds, are the pillars of Hercules, said to bear the words, "There is nothing beyond this point." And the third poem is a is a longer one. It's called School for Boys. I believe in the power of original sin, in the wound that keeps on wounding. The son of the suicide becomes a suicide. His own son becomes a drunk. You're not meant to be so unhappy, you think. So it must be something that you've done. There must be a reason why you are the way you are. I've forgiven the teenage pedophile who lived a few doors down when I was 7. The things he did to me, I'm sure, were done to him at home. Sunday afternoons, I'd be sent out into the yard where I could do no harm beyond decapitating my mother's tulips or torturing the roly-polies that lived in the rotted out retaining wall around the flower bed. I and other boys would fight, shoplift, wreck each other's fortresses of plywood, boards, and brick, earn a nickel from the beer store for every bottle that we found in the no man's land of alleys that led both north and south. The anger, the shame. Over time, these things just become a piece of who you are. You build around them since you can't burn them down. One boy, by far the most precocious forager in our tribe, stole a box of 3D movie glasses from the loading dock behind the Cineplex and brought them to my parents' house with the idea that we'd sell the glasses pair by pair at school. But the box sat below the deck, going nowhere. In time, its contents were scattered and destroyed. In time, I was sent to a private school dedicated to forming the whole boy. His body, his conscience, his character, his mind. There too, some men did prey on children in darkness of a different kind. My fellow students gave me lessons in strength and weakness that I will not forget. And yet, some of the faculty, masters they were called, were among the most decent men I've known. One giant of a physics teacher who sometimes would grab boys by the collar or roar into their faces while gripping them by the ear. The man roamed the corridors, scowling on a rolling cloud of fear, brought me into his office, and after making me swear I'd never tell another boy, opened a sketch pad of watercolor paintings. They were his own, the most fragile lilies, snapdragons, and other flowers, unfolding like translucent creatures from the ocean floor. He let me sit there in silence, turning pages for half an hour. Life is not a boys' school, he told me. Be one man for the world and another for yourself. Then he put his paintings away on a high shelf. When I was 7, all that lay years ahead. In my 2nd grade class, there was a pale elfin redhead, I won't say his name, whose mother always sent him to school in a tie and blazer. How many times we made that boy cry, I just don't remember. He said he was an extraterrestrial in disguise, and that his people would soon arrive and kill us, every one, or take us off to be vivisected. And his story didn't change when we threw his books into the trash or when we pinned him to the ground and made him eat the dirty snow. I think I half believed him, but his people never came. Thank you.
Wow, James, that was amazing. I'm unmuting everyone right now, please. That was really amazing, James. Thank you so much. Going to mute everyone again, except for James. Where did he go? There he is. Unmute him. James, thank you so much. That was really amazing. I wish that everyone could see you read live, because I don't know if they can see over Zoom. I think one of your most amazing attributes, which is that James reads all, or he doesn't read them, is the thing. James gives his poems completely from memory, all of them. And that was something that we did in his class, which was amazing. You may remember it from English 383, James.
Ryan is very kind. We were both kids. I was just a few years older than Ryan. I would not want to see the syllabus that I wrote at that time in my life.
Well, it was really, it was a really meaningful class, and it was so lovely to hear those poems. And yeah, again, if you have anything that you'd love to let James know, feel free to drop that in the chat. That was really lovely. Thank you so much, James.
Thanks.
Wow. lovely to hear that. I guess one of the strange things about doing something like this from Zoom is that, we don't go to the bar to freshen our drinks for intermission. We just kind of keep charging ahead. But if you need to, feel free, as I said, I have the tea and the White Claw going at the same time, which really feels just exactly like the zeitgeist right now. So that's sort of where we're all at. But that was lovely. And up next, we have our final reader. This is going very quickly. All of you wonderful people, how can we prolong it? Our next reader, I'm going to unmute her now. She's someone who I just met tonight, but have known within the community for a long time. She's a titan, really, of the literary community, I would say. She does so much, I think, for everyone. And I'm so pleased and delighted to have her here with us tonight. Her name is Sari Botton, and she is a writer and editor living in Kingston, New York, lovely Kingston, New York. And her writing has appeared in the New York Times and many other publications. She's also the essays editor for Longeads and edited the award-winning anthology Goodbye to All That, Writers on Loving and Leaving New York, and its New York Times best-selling follow-up, Never Can Say Goodbye, Writers on Their Unshakable Love for New York. She teaches at Catapult and the MFA program at Bay Path University. I think she is finishing up some grading, maybe as we speak. Is that true?
That is true. I'm doing final papers now, editing and grading final papers, but not at this very moment. At this very moment, I'm here at the Rally Reading Series.
It's so great to have you.
So should I?
To have you.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here, and yeah. So should I jump in or?
Feel free, or if you wanna just freestyle, feel free. We're along for the ride. I think nobody's going anywhere, so we're at your mercy. Or you can jump in. No pressure.
Well, yeah. Well, what I'm going to read tonight is it's an installment of my newsletter. My newsletter is adventuresinjournalism.substack.com. This installment is a blind item, and it is a letter to someone who I refer to as Bink. And it's about sexism in publishing. It's all aimed at one particular person who I once worked with, but it touches on a lot of what I dealt with, what I've dealt with throughout my career. And it is called "The Patron Saint of Canceled Men Hereby Resigns." Here we go. Dear blank, regarding your recent request that I use my position and connections and good name to help garner positive reception for your forthcoming book, now that the tide of public opinion has largely turned against you, I regret to inform you that upon further consideration, you are shit out of luck. Oh, blank, how dare you even ask? Don't answer, I know. You are accustomed to women volunteering to aid you free of charge for the mere pleasure of finding ourselves in your good graces, if only momentarily. And it is only ever momentary. The charm offensive and attention never last. I know this well. Years ago, you summarily dropped me as a friend, despite the ways in which I consistently helped you. Come to think of it, probably because of the ways that I helped you. It happened right after the last time you leaned on me. Weeks later, just like that, you received the next of many plum rewards for your boyish, affable averageness, a coronation so prominent it seemed advisable for you to cut ties with anyone below your station, anyone who knew that you were more manners and style than substance, anyone who had once been tasked with holding your hand as you effortlessly ascended a ladder we were not welcome to climb, no matter how talented or hardworking we were. I was not alone, blank. There were several of us who got left behind, women who'd willingly stood over your shoulder again and again, feeding you words and sentences and assurances as you struggled anxiously with your writing. We never asked the same of you because, frankly, we didn't need your help. We were better trained, more capable. We had more than earned our places. Nothing had been handed to us straight out of the gate because of family connections. We knew that to even tenuously hold onto our rungs of the ladder, we had to work twice as hard, had to sometimes do both our work and yours, had to act like your personal secretary, phoning people to cancel lunches for you at the last minute, despite our technically being your peers and older than you. We had to muffle our anger, sublimating it into smiling agreeability. There was no vernacular back then for the gender differences in how we were treated, or at least in forum, and no support for those who might dare to speak out. All those years ago, blank, you sat on my threadbare couch in my East Village hovel, fresh off the Concord, begging me, a struggling freelancer and ghostwriter, to help you, a well-compensated editor, assemble the latest of many articles you were insecure about writing, free of charge. This was for a publication I'd left years before after being treated unfairly, no, badly. Okay, not entirely free of charge. In exchange for my help, you tossed out a promise that if I finished my memoir, you'd feature it in said publication, despite one of the top brass, your tireless champion, my bully, shunning me. Here we are 2 decades later, and look at that. You effortlessly landed a publishing contract for a splashy book of your own. I'd like to know who stood over your shoulder and helped you write it. And I am out here trying to find a deal for my quiet little memoir and essays. Blank, you might never know what it is like to live in a world where for decades, every time you pursue something, the first answer is predictably no. Where you have to constantly labor to get across to gatekeepers why your voice and ideas are worth amplifying. Perhaps after years of hearing only the word yes, you are now first finding out. On the phone, you asked me about my book, And You May Find Yourself, the proposal for which my agent is now shopping. I told you it's about being a late-blooming Gen X lady who has zigzagged haphazardly through life while battling a case of imposter syndrome, born of trying to be who I thought people, mostly men, wanted me to be instead of who I actually was. The irony is that on our call, I slipped right into being who I thought you wanted me to be, an instantly all-forgiving, sympathetic, helpful, spineless pal, even though you never once asked for my forgiveness or acknowledged having ditched me. I regret the enthusiasm enthusiasm with which I received your call, my knee-jerk cheerful agreement to help you out, and my openness about how hard it was for me where we worked back in the day. I wasn't lying though. It was good to hear your voice. I'd missed you since you dropped me. We'd had some nice times together. I'd felt a kind of kinship with you. There was also a very old part of me that was energized by once again feeling seen by the likes of you, an anointed arbiter of the straight white male gaze. All those feelings tripped me up and took me off course, away from myself and my best interests. But after the call, words you'd said to me reminded me. I'm glad you were willing to take my call. Right. There were reasons I might not have been willing. Perhaps should not have been. Since then, I've been feeling pretty triggered. I hope you appreciate my blurring your identity here, blank. When I obliquely tweeted about this, women I respect suggested I name you. You are the beneficiary of my great conflictedness, part consideration for your humanity, part distaste for the oversimplicity and brutality of cancel culture, part deep patriarchal conditioning toward pleasing and protecting charming men. Honestly, it doesn't ultimately matter who you are. There are so many others just like you. You aren't even the first essentially canceled man to turn to me for sympathy and assistance. You might be happy to know that one of the other guys is a lot more canceled. I worried it might hurt for you to see this, but considering that you hadn't been sufficiently curious to even Google me before reaching out on your book publicist's suggestion, you said you knew nothing of the anthologies I've published or other recent work as an editor or writer or teacher. It's quite possible you'll never come across this anyway. Then again, I did briefly mention this newsletter to you. I told you I was writing about my wayward career path, but had not yet gotten to the part where we worked together. Now be nice, you chided me in a paternalistic tone. But niceness in the face of shittiness is false and self-abandoning. And I am writing a goddamn book about no longer being false and self-abandoning. God has helped me if you get to publish a book and I do not. So I need to live by my word. Sorry, dude. In the words of one of my feminist idols, the great, late Maggie Estep, no more, Mr. Nice Girl. I can't help you, blank. Probably no one can, but good luck in your search. Meanwhile, I hereby tender my resignation as the patron saint of canceled men. Sincerely, Sari Botton.
Sari, that was amazing. I'm unmuting everyone. Let's hear it, people. That was amazing.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That was absolutely lovely. All right, I'm gonna mute everyone again, and I'm going to unmute our authors, if I can find them. Wonderful. So here we all are. Thank you all for joining us. And does anybody have any reactions or questions? That was so lovely. All of those pieces, I loved each and every one of them, and I feel like they each spoke to something unique, but I felt like they were also a little bit in conversation with one another. That was really special. Do any of the authors have questions for any of the other authors?
I don't have questions, just compliments. I just really enjoyed your work so much.
Yeah,
I felt the same, and this was
really
fun.
lovely.
I haven't done a Zoom reading, and it's fun to hear people read. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you.
It has been a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really thought the the sort of idea that the be nice was so powerful, in your piece, Sari. That was like,
Thank you.
that the sort of, the idea of, just being nice generally. I feel like that's such a way to silence people. And it seemed like it also, that sort of came out a little bit in your work, Laura. Like, do you two, I don't know if you have any comments about that, or just, your experience, or sort of it feels like a little bit there was, there's a little bit of just the anger being unmuffled, I think, was a line from Sari's. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Laura, do
felt
you have
like,
any-
Laura,
any-
as soon
any
as I
thoughts
heard
about that?
you,
Oh, sorry.
yeah, as soon as I heard you start to read, Laura, I thought our pieces were similar. But James, you also deal with, men, and, there's a lot of toxic masculinity in a lot of what we were reading, and it felt like it all, there was a resonance.
I thought so too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How are you guys dealing just with I feel like there's some, I've heard it called anticipatory grief, but I feel like there's just a whole heap of emotions, and sometimes I'll just cycle through them daily, up and down, and feeling all kinds of different emotions. But are you folks dealing with that too, or what's sort of the predominating emotion you've been feeling throughout this experience? James, what do you think?
Do you mean about the coronavirus
Yeah.
specifically?
Specifically or generally, yeah.
I feel, as I'm sure a lot of people do, I feel fear, and I don't exactly know. I feel fear and tremendous anxiety, and yet at the same time, it moves from one specific fear to another. I almost don't know what to be afraid of. I just know to be afraid. And I worry for my parents, and I worry for my child, and I worry for my wife and my friends. Worry for worry about my job, and and then worry for the whole country, worry for the whole world. And in some ways, there's almost so much to worry about that it just becomes a stew of worry and anxiety, and it's almost hard to even sort out the feelings, because they all seem so intermeshed.
Yeah, what are some strategies that how are you
Person
dealing with
asked.
it? I assume with White Claw, James.
Yeah. Noise canceling headphones. I'm the wrong person to ask. Deep breathe.
Yeah.
I think
What about you,
powerlessness
Laura?
is a big.
Oh, Sari, go
sorry.
ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Sari.
Okay.
No?
I think powerlessness has been one of the most consistent feelings. I mean, there's worry, there's anxiety, there's anger, I'm cycling through these emotions all day, and then just exhaustion. But I think there's a feeling of powerlessness that pervades constantly. Because there's so little we can do, and it's not just the virus. There's a malignancy in our leadership that either doesn't care about us, or actually might want to kill us or control us by hurting us. And that feeling of powerlessness is really hard to reckon with, because I've never in my life felt as powerless. I've always felt somewhat powerless, and I'm sort of, as I get older, I'm sort of making sense of that as a woman. But we're also dealing with a leadership that hates women and people of color, and anybody who's not straight white Christian males and the women who love them. So I'm dealing with a level of power and powerlessness that is hard to integrate.
Absolutely. And your piece sort of touched on, you know, it had some humor in it, and you know, there was definitely some anger, and you know, you talked about the sublimation and thing, and like, I've been thinking about anger. I was editing a piece actually today about anger management. I work at an online therapy company, and so I was thinking about anger, and you know, can it be useful, or you know, how? What do you think about anger, Sari? Is that something that you think about these days?
Oh God, yeah. Anger is a tough one for women.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm 54, and so I'm like early Gen X, and I was conditioned for most of my life to never express anger. And you know, it's only been something I've been learning to, or trying to learn to integrate and deal with appropriately as an adult, since I'd say like my mid 40s. And you know, I think that it's really a tough one. There are times when it's appropriate to be angry, and my initial instinct is to stuff it down, make it go away, act nice, be nice. And I almost didn't publish that installment of my newsletter because I was so afraid that it was going to hurt Blank's feelings. I'm pretty sure Blank has read it. And most people know who it is. Most people can figure it out. But I was so worried about it. But then I reached a point where I think this is a new thing for me, where my anger tripped me over to, I had to take action. So it was self-abandonment not to. So, but I'm working on it. It's not easy.
Yeah.
I wonder what you think, Laura, as another woman. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say that when I published my first book of poems, one of my colleagues, a man, he said, "You seem so nice. I can't believe you wrote those things." And actually really true. I've been really conditioned, you know, to be very smiley and kind and nice. But then I'm also like, I have this goal every birthday. I'm like, this year I'm going to become edgy, but that hasn't happened. So, but in my work, I can sometimes, you know, so, and I'm Gen X too. And so like, I really understand that. Like, I feel like I've been so thoroughly conditioned and I'm trying to fight back against it. But I guess I'm not so angry right now. I mean, I guess I'm angry, but I have two kids who are 17 and 20, two sons, and they are just having a terrible time. So like one's a senior in high school and one's a junior in college. And my senior in high school is, you know, pretty brokenhearted. And I know it's a small thing in the bigger scope of what's happening, but living with two boys who should be launching is really stressful. So, and I thought I wanted to keep them, but I do not. They're just so unhappy, you know, so that's really hard. So it's hard for me to kind of process anything else because I can't like make them feel okay. Like I can't help, you know, so yeah, it's a hard time. So yeah,
Extremely.
and worrying about everyone.
Yeah. What about you, James? I know you said it's sort of a stew of emotions, and you know, maybe I'd just be interested to know, you know, is anger something that comes up in, you know, your life and your work? And like, I think about, you know, productive anger or ways to channel anger that aren't just either self-destructive or or just, you know, sort of meaningless.
Well, the thing, I mean, that's the question for me, you know. I mean, I was a very, very angry young man. I mean, really, I mean, out of control when I was a teenager or in my early 20s, and most of it was turned inward, but not all of it was turned inward. And part of learning to be a grown-up for me personally meant learning to bottle some of that up, because it was, you know, I wasn't a good guy, and I wasn't, and I mean, the school, School for Boys, I mean, it presents as nonfiction, and it is nonfiction. I mean, I tried to be absolutely strictly accurate about it, and that toxic masculinity. I mean, that's really what that poem is about for me. Is about trying to see a way of, I mean, the ethos of that particular school was that it's you're either strong or you're weak. You're either a dominator or you're dominated. So if you don't want someone to do it to you, do it to them. And adulthood for me has been a long, slow process of learning and believing that that's not actually the way of the world, and that doesn't have to be the meaning of life. That's there's another way to live. So I mean, anger can be productive, but for me, and I believe in it, and I believe in it as a force for productive change. But in my own case, there was a lot of poisonous anger that I had to learn to manage.
I think that's really interesting. I mean, and Laura, you had a piece that was sort of addressing our current, what we're dealing with right now. Do you other two writers, do you think that you will address what's happening now? Do you feel compelled to sort of write about what's happening now? Sari, what do you think?
I wrote a piece on Longreads early in the pandemic about why I was giving myself permission to write now. Because I was seeing a lot of people saying, like, how selfish and vain to think that whatever you have to say matters. And I wrote a piece about how my great-grandmother died in the influenza epidemic, the 1918 epidemic, and I know nothing about her or her experience, and I wish I did. And that was one of the reasons. And also because while it's hard to string together more than a few words at a time, I am having ideas come up and thoughts and sentences, and so I'm allowing myself to capture whatever small amounts I can capture, because I know that later they'll be useful. So I wrote a piece about that, and it also had a bunch of resources at the bottom of it. And then I wrote another piece about how I've been inspired to talk on the phone and FaceTime to people I have fallen out with in the past, as a person who hates the telephone generally. And also this thing that I learned to say, so that you don't have to just forgive people if you're still mad at them. You could just say, let's reset. Let's reset and let's start over and let's talk, because the world is a mess. So those are two pieces I've written during this, and I'm definitely going to add a piece to my essay collection about living through this. I mean, how can you not write about it? But that said, what I write now, I might not develop until much later, because I'm going to need time to process it. I'm going to need critical distance from it, but I'm getting it down.
Do you feel like you're documenting in a way? Like, does it feel important to you to sort of like keep a log of the experience? Because definitely, for me in my life, it feels so much bigger than sort of anything else that we've gone through generationally or otherwise.
Oh, definitely. I mean, that's also what made me a writer. I became a writer. People, I saw on Twitter today, somebody said, what's the book that made you want to be a writer? And that wasn't it for me. I became a writer because I felt like a weirdo in my world. I didn't feel like everybody else. And I was taking notes. I felt like an alien from outer space. And I was reporting back on what it was to be me in this strange environment. In fact, I used to go into my closet and whisper into a tape recorder about what the world was like and what sucked and what was hard. And so I'm doing it again. It's just what I do. It's weird. I'm a weirdo.
That's
I'm outing
no,
myself.
I love it.
Alien.
I think anyone who would self-identify as a writer, I think is self-selecting as a weirdo. What about you, Laura? Are you writing more about, sort of what's happening?
I've been writing a lot about it, yeah. I wrote a poem about Kenny Rogers' death that coincided with issues with the pandemic. And then I also wrote a poem about my great-grandmother. So from the early 20th century. She didn't die in the flu, but I was just trying to, and she's from New York. And so I was kind of like making a connection to her and to New York. And I've written several other pieces, I'm trying to think, but almost every day. Like last night I was trying to write something about patriotism because my sons were having a big argument about the West Wing because we're watching a lot of television. And so that was kind of interesting because one of my sons was saying that he was embarrassed to say that he was patriotic, and the other one was like, why are you embarrassed? And it was an interesting conversation. And then I was like, am I patriotic? Is it, like I just thought that was really interesting, and I tried to write about it because I don't think of myself as patriotic, but there is something that I guess the coronavirus springing out, it precludes a care for the entire world, but there is also something about, like I was listening to This Land Is Your Land with my kids, and I don't know, I've just been feeling a little bit of attachment to home and place. And so I've been writing, I think I've been writing almost every day about it. I do feel like the need to get it down because I'm like, this is different from anything we've ever lived through, so every night I feel like I need to write a few things. And it's a release too, like it helps to process.
What about you, James? Are you feeling so? I talk to people. Some people are sort of unable to write right now, and I think that's a perfectly acceptable reaction to something so monumental. But what about for you, James?
I have had trouble writing lately, but actually I've just started to feel like things might be changing. I feel I don't know what's changed, except that I felt unsure of what I had, I don't want to feel like I'm just making sausage. Like I feel like the poems have to be coming out of some urgency, and they have to be meaningful to me. And I wasn't finding it. I wasn't finding that urgency. Not that I didn't feel anything, not that I didn't care about anything, but couldn't find a way of bringing it to the page. And then I don't know, something I think is shifting. But I'm sorry, that's all very vague and abstract, but that's kind of the way it is at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's totally acceptable. It's so interesting, and it's interesting. I think you described your poems. You said as sort of as nonfiction. I think that's so. I feel like at work the other day we had a poetry workshop. One of my coworkers is a poet, and it was mainly like they were a zoo animal, and people, everyone was just sort of asking questions like, what are you? You're a poet, what does that mean? No one really understood. So it's interesting. I think, just the idea of where people situate truth in poems. And, I think there's there's an assumption sometimes that they're autobiographical, but I don't know. I feel like, how does that play out in your work, I guess?
For me, I don't, to be clear, I'm not interested in saying what other people, should do or could do. Because I think we all find our own ways of navigating these questions. But for me specifically, I just want it to be clear. I want a reader to know. I don't want to feel like I'm hoodwinking the reader. I want the reader to know. I have poems that are clearly fantastical, like the Troy poem, obviously, like the Troy, it's a metaphor for Iraq or other wars like Iraq, but it's got a fictional premise in that it's kind of set in the world of the Odyssey. But something like School for Boys, which presents as autobiography, I feel like because it presents as autobiography, I feel that it puts me under an obligation to make sure that it's absolutely accurate. I mean, for me, the distinction, I don't think of poetry as having being in an opposite relationship to fiction. I think of it as being in an opposite relationship to prose. So, which is to say, just as prose can be fiction or it can be nonfiction, and in most, I mean, of course, there's work that pushes that boundary in an interesting way, but mostly when you're reading prose, you kind of want to know whether it's fiction or nonfiction. I feel like my readers reading my poems would probably want to know if they're fiction or nonfiction, so I try to make it clear.
Absolutely. Sari, what about, I mean, in your, I mean, you edit for long reads, and I mean, I feel like I mostly work in fiction, and so I'm just wondering, like, it feels kind of strange right now. It seems like almost, I feel like drawn more to nonfiction in a way, just because there's so much nonsense coming out, and fact is fiction sometimes, and fiction fact. It just feels like with the administration and things, I'm really hungering for something that's true. Do you see anything like that? Are you feeling anything like that, or from others maybe?
I'm not sure exactly what the question is. You're talking about a blurring of fact and fiction, or are you saying that?
I'm just wondering, like, are people especially looking for something that feels true, maybe?
Oh, well, I mean,
Right
I
now.
only work with nonfiction. I sometimes write fiction, but I've only published one piece. But I'm bombarded right now with people's Corona stories, and in submission. People want to tell their stories. They want to tell their aspects that they're dealing with. So there's a lot of people who want to write nonfiction about what's happening right now. And I salute them, and I can't publish them all, but I'm happy to see people addressing this and recording it and interpreting it. And I've been seeing it through the whole Trump administration, through the whole Me Too movement, through the Black Lives Matter movement, through, so many movements. It's been an exciting time. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of oppression, but it is making people stand up and speak out in a way that matters and makes a difference. And gives me optimism.
That's lovely. Do you folks have any other reactions? I feel like that's just a nice, maybe a nice capstone for us, for this particular series. James or Laura, anything else you'd like to add?
I just want to say I'm really grateful to have been a part of it. It's really
Yeah.
been a moving evening, and I really feel honored to be part of this group, and I really have appreciated the generosity and intimacy that everyone, all of us, all participants and audience, and you, Ryan, I just feel it's been a really nice evening.
Me
Thank
too.
you very much.
I hope I can meet you
Exactly.
someday. Yeah. Yeah.
And I also really love that drawing of the three of us. Those drawings are great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Of course. I'm glad you. I usually try and check with people to make sure that they approve of their illustration, but sort of ran out of time this time, so I just
No, it's
had to
great.
go.
Very flattering in my case. I think it's the first flattering drawing anyone's ever done of me.
That's very cool. Excellent. Well, thank you folks all so much. I'm going to unmute everyone and we can just clap a little bit, I think. So here you go.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you.
Nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet
and,
everyone.
nice to read with you guys. And thank you so much. I'm honored. And yeah.
Me
Thank
too.
you,
Take
folks.
care of yourselves.
Yes, everybody stay safe.
Yeah.
Stay safe and well. Thank you,
Thank
folks.
you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.